Thank you very much, Nancy. Let me start by admiring you for still being here after such a wonderful conference, but it's been very long and very intensive, I realize, and I'm very glad to come to one of nearly the last event of the conference and to have a few things to say. The first thing I'd like to say is it is a real pleasure to be in Hong Kong. I've been here before. I feel as though I'm returning not just to colleagues but also to friends, and it's really wonderful to have been able to come here. I wasn't able to be here yesterday because of a commitment in Japan, but today has been very rich and rewarding. And in many ways, I feel I am a fortunate man. I think that somehow in one's life things come together, and in my case it has, and it's so rewarding to be involved in bioethics at this point, because I believe that over the last few decades we've seen an ever-increasing awareness, both in medicine and in science, of how important this field is. When I started my career longer ago than I care to think, it was a struggle to be heard. Now this is not so, and it's a sign of this that here in the Chinese University of Hong Kong there is such a determination to make sure that this field has prominence and will continue into the future. So I've been asked to just say a few things in terms of what it means to have a center in the field, what are the possibilities in terms of teaching, research, and dialogue. And although this may seem a little like self-advertisement, I have been asked to talk about my own center as an example first, and then I'll raise some more general points. But let me emphasize that every context is unique, that what has happened in Singapore will not be, I'm sure, replicated in Hong Kong. Nevertheless, maybe we've learned some things. We have some basic, important principles that we believe should be followed, and I shall try and explain these in this relatively short address. So here's the outline then of what I have to say. I'll talk a little bit about the Singapore Center. Then I'll talk about what can be achieved by setting up a center of this kind. And then I'll have one or two ideas about what the future might hold. But these are really just to start a discussion. And as you'll know from the program, my lecture will be followed by a panel discussion when others will be able to contribute their thoughts about this as well. So I think, as you've heard already, the Center for Biomedical Ethics in the Yong Lin School of Medicine was established in 2006, so 8 years ago. And one of the first things I would like to say is that it is so important that it is within the School of Medicine. I believe that we can locate centers in various places, and there are examples of centers in law, in philosophy, but if you're right inside the School of Medicine, then you are able to have a different kind of effect on the future training of health professionals, and also you can then more easily create the essential multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary links that are so important to bioethics. So as this mentions, I've been the first director and the Chen Su-Lan Centennial Professor. The position was established in honor of one of the nation's best-known philanthropists, the late Dr. Chen Su-Lan. In fact, Dr. Chen was in the first graduating group, I believe, from the medical school, which was founded in 1905. And so in 2005, the university, which grew out of the medical school, was celebrating 100 years. And they raised funds of various kinds, and one was from the Chen Su-Lan Trust to create this chair in medical ethics. Subsequently, there are just one or two features that we mentioned in this opening slide. We've been able to recruit Tom Murray as a visiting Chen Su-Lan Professor of Medical Ethics. And many of you will know, and indeed many of Tom's former colleagues are here, that Tom Murray was the president of the Hastings Center in New York until recently, and a very eminent bioethicist. So we're able to bring Tom over on a regular basis to assist us. Another achievement of which I'm very proud in the center is that we founded the quarterly journal, the Asian Bioethics Review, and we had the assistance of the Hastings Center at the beginning of that, because we were able to exchange articles between the Hastings Center report and our review. That journal is now independent. It runs without the collaboration with the review, but we're still, as you're aware from this meeting, very strongly collaborating with our colleagues in New York, as well as with our colleagues in Oxford. And then a recent achievement of the center was this March, we were designated the first collaborating center in Asia, in ethics, of course, of the World Health Organization. And that, I think, is one of the features that I want to emphasize in the rest of this talk, which is that while one should go for a national identity, bioethics is an international field, and it's very, very important to work on international collaborations in terms of research and other matters. So in the next few slides, again, I apologize, this is a rather cluttered slide, but I'll just pick out the main points. We started from the beginning with these 6 objectives. And you may be interested to see that the first objective is research. So we were quite determined in starting the center to start with the idea that this is a genuine academic discipline that requires research, that there has to be a constant interplay between education and research. And I'll come later to the kind of research that we've been able to carry out over the 8 years. But secondly, and this was definitely the aim of the funders, we implemented an undergraduate medical ethics program, which is an integrated teaching program. We have a 5-year medical curriculum in National University of Singapore, and we are all through all 5 years as a longitudinal track in the program. I'll return to that in a little while. Then I already mentioned research collaborations, so with centers in Asia, the USA, Australasia, and Europe. Again, I think these are always hard work. We've been a partner twice in a European community grant, and that's worth thinking about, by the way, because the Europeans do look for one Asian partner as broadening the research that's done. So we've done that twice, but we've also got numerous links. Again, this is a short talk, so I won't repeat all of them. We think the interchange here between Asia, Europe, and the USA is hugely important. And then you'll see the next aim, and I know this is, again, those of you who are behind the idea of a center here are very keen on this aim. Quite rightly, it is actually to help in terms of advice to the government and other agencies. We have a National Bioethics Advisory Committee, but in addition to that, we advise the Ministry of Health. We also advise other government agencies and funders on ethics aspect. And I believe that's what an academic center can do. It can actually give disinterested advice to government agencies about the ethical aspects of their policy. Then there's the question of public understanding. I'll return to that again, but increasingly ethical issues in biomedicine are of huge interest to the public. In fact, I've learned to tell white lies if I'm on a long air flight. Somebody says, well, what do you do? If I say I teach medical ethics, I never get any sleep because there's so much interest in medical ethics. everywhere. So usually I say, oh, philosophy, and my person next to me goes to sleep right away. And then the whole idea of promoting conferences and seminars, one of the things that we feel very strongly is that we have an obligation to the countries near us in Singapore, where biomedical ethics or bioethics is very underdeveloped. And I'm not going to reel off the countries, but Southeast Asia varies hugely in the extent to which there's appropriate governance of research and in which the issues to do with ethics and biomedicine are even raised at all. So we see as part of our obligation a regional commitment to expand the understanding of the discipline. So these are the 6 points that we adopted from the very beginning, and we've sought to give attention to all 6 as best we can. Because one of the issues that arises is if you're going to start something, where do you start? You can't do all of this at once. But I think the twin areas of research and undergraduate teaching are definitely the place to start. And you can go from there to the further roles once you establish an identity. Now I'm going to boast about my staff. This does feel a little bit like boasting, but it's not. I just think I'm a fortunate man. I have a wonderful staff. So here's our academic full-time. By academic, I mean these are people who are in tenured positions, paid for by the grant to the university by the government. And I've put in our disciplines because I want to make the point about the interdisciplinary nature. So no names here, but so the director, qualified in philosophy and theology, then just recruited an associate professor as our undergraduate director, who is originally from Hong Kong and is skilled in both music and philosophy. And then that should read next, associate professor, postgraduate director from Singapore, philosophy. Then an assistant professor from Singapore in law, someone from the UK who's skilled in science, law, and ethics, a lecturer who's got the Confucianism background as well as philosophy, and then very important 3 adjunct positions of clinicians in geriatric psychiatry and general practice. But then the last thing, again, essential, we have 25 or more clinicians who are willing to be employed as tutors in our undergraduate program. And so as you can see, the majority of us, although we're from different disciplines, are not medically qualified. So it's absolutely essential that we have the medical input and collaboration. So that's just one example of the kind of setup you can have in a center. And then with our research grants, again, we have this good range of disciplines. As you can see, I won't go through all the names: philosophy, law, theology, health sciences, medical tourism, and another in health sciences, so social science type of training. So I think the point I'm trying to make with these slides is to say that once you be in medicine, medicine is the right place to be, but at the same time, we should look at the multidisciplinary nature and the sharing of expertise. And I think this 2-day conference has been a wonderful example of how that can be achieved. One of the things that I've really been impressed with is the way in which the clinicians in the audience have been aware that these are issues that matter to them, that they're willing to talk about their clinical experience. So it's not just philosophers talking to each other, but it's that dialogue and interaction which is so fundamental. And I think this conference shows that here in Hong Kong, you're getting off to a flying start in this. Again, here's a list of the areas of research that we've been involved in recently, a lot of it with overseas institutions. So you can see the range. I'm not going to take time by reading the whole list, but much of this, again, is connected with specific grants that we have. The genetics one, just to pick that out as an example, we have particularly been involved with the Human Genome Organization and involved in the ethics committee of that. And of course, you've heard a lot about the wonderful work that's been done in clinical ethics and end-of-life issues with the grants that Jacqueline Chin has obtained and our collaboration with Oxford and with Hastings Centre. So there's an exciting list of areas for research, and I think we're going to continue to keep as much of this richness as we can in our research portfolio. Then to mention teaching, there are 3 areas of this that I would mention briefly. One is the undergraduate program, which is our raison d'etre. We wouldn't be a center if we hadn't offered to make ethics a genuine part of medical training. We call I mentioned we're a longitudinal track, which is, in other words, we have presence in all 5 years of medicine. And we found rather a good name for the track. It's called the HELP track. HELP stands for Health Ethics, Law, and Professionalism. So there are 3 features that we're trying to interrelate. The whole health ethics or medical ethics area, then the legal aspects, and then the whole idea of developing professionalism. And while the first 2 are partly to do with knowledge and skills, the third one is the toughest one, which is to do with attitudes, with how do you actually develop a professional set of attitudes in the future graduates from the medical school. We have postgraduate program with doctoral students, and currently we have 4 PhD students enrolled. There's an increasing interest in our medical school in interprofessional education, and ethics is one obvious area in which you can look at collaboration between different schools. Within our Faculty of Medicine, we also have a Center for Nursing Studies and a pharmacy, and so one can look at cross-fertilization. But I think those of you who've tried this will know how difficult it is to achieve logistically, but it is a goal that we would like to achieve. Then I come to public awareness. And again, the whole question of the nature of the conferences that we might hold, to what extent are these pulling together people who are interested in the subject from an academic, to what extent are they of interest to the public? To refer again to the material with which you'll be most familiar, introduced by Jacqueline Chin this morning, the whole area of end of life and dilemmas, difficult decisions, these are of huge interest to the public, and the question is how can one further this public interest in order to improve the understanding of the issues. Now, I'm not saying we've managed to do this particularly well, but it certainly would be an aim to achieve this. Then one of the other things we've done, and this mirrors some excellent work that's been done in the Hastings Centre, is to look at bioethics in schools. And we work in high schools and junior colleges in Singapore with a separate grant that funds this. Rather interesting initiative there has been the commissioning of a play from a small theatre company in Singapore called The Necessary Stage. And the play has a wonderful title. It's called Future Perfect. And Future Perfect depicts 3 possible scenarios. One is designer babies. Another one is stem cells creating compatible kidneys. And the third one is a pill that allows you to live indefinitely. And the acting and the scripting of this is highly professional. It's been an extremely popular play with young people and has allowed us to promote lots of discussion with sometimes huge numbers of school students, 1,200, 1,500 school students seeing the play and then getting involved in the discussion. So we're very pleased with that program. And then we have a bioethics trail in the Science Center. This was inaugurated when we had the World Congress of Bioethics in 2010 in Singapore. And this is where the center has its various aspects to do with the human body, for example, the brain, and so on. It has a series of stations, some of which are interactive, which raise ethical issues. And the pupils or young people or adults who attend the Science Center can try out their ideas in relation to the issues which are raised. It's another attempt to raise awareness of the issues. That's an exhibition trail that will continue in the Science Center for 5 years and may well be renewed after that. So these are all ways in which we've tried to be a center that is both academic and at the same time is stimulating an aware public, a public who will not be caught by simplifications about whatever issue happens to hit the press, whether this be euthanasia or stem cells or whatever. We want a better public understanding of the issues. So I come then to the future. As I say, I've tried to keep this relatively short because I think it would be good to have a panel discussion about this and other issues. So what does one see in the future? I mentioned regional collaborations already. I don't think that we should be constantly talking about Asian bioethics because I'm not quite sure what Asian bioethics is. Even though we do have a journal called the Asian Bioethics Review, I would prefer to talk about bioethics in Asia, understanding that Asia has not one single cultural identity, but actually has a fascinating richness of cultures and many different traditions. And so the regional collaboration is about looking at the opportunities that arise from working in such a rich part of the world as Asia. People think I'm just being flattering when I say this, but let me say genuinely, this is not flattery. I've really never had such an exciting and fulfilling time as a director of a center as the time I've spent in Asia. And I think it's because of the amazing wealth of the continent and its history, its ethnicity, diverse ethnicity, so much there that we can work together on. In the center, we're going to start something we're going to call ABC. This is potentially confusing as Mikey's scheme is also ABC, but ABC in this case stands for Asian Bioethics Colloquium. And one of the things that we're interested in doing is encouraging young scholars to be able to improve their capacity to publish in the bioethics literature internationally, not just in the Asian Bioethics Review. And this will be a new regional collaboration that we're beginning, I hope, within the next year to bring out the potential richness of scholarship. The Asian Bioethics Review already offers a prize, an essay prize, for young researchers whose papers are accepted by the peer review system. And these are always given to a person from an Asian country. But this will be a further development of regional collaboration. Also, I think we really do need to improve the quality of public debate. That's why I put it on the future as well as the present. I think it is very hard to achieve, and I think there may be other ways of doing it than the ways that we've attempted. So I think we need to start wondering about how else we can make sure that both policy decision, governmental decisions, which can often be influenced by public opinion, and just public awareness of the complexity and importance of these issues can be raised. And finally, we're developing the idea of ethics as really a total career experience for healthcare practitioners. The idea that somehow you sort of get ethics like, you know, you get anatomy, physiology, and then you get ethics, and then you go and practice. It doesn't fit the experience of health professionals in a rapidly changing world in which new issues constantly arise, new challenges arise. And for those of us who are educators in this field, by far the most rewarding part of education is actually working with the experienced clinicians, because they're really keen to explore these issues. It matters so much to them. And so, again, in Singapore, we're exploring how we can have the idea of a roadmap through a health professional's career, and what kind of assistance could be offered at different stages in that career, whether it's at specialist training or later, again, in terms of refreshing courses. And the Ministry of Health in Singapore has set up a national committee, which is called the National Ethics Capability Committee, to look at the whole scene in terms of continuing professional education across not only medicine, although it will start with medicine, but a whole series of different health professionals. I find that very exciting and a great opportunity. I'm the vice chairman of that committee, but those of you who are commenting on, I don't think the dean is here at the moment, but who is commenting on the difficulty of making surgeons realize that ethics matters, it's being chaired by an orthopedic surgeon who is Director of Medical Services in Singapore before. So again, I think not just staying with undergraduate, even though you start there, but looking towards the whole course of a clinical experience and the moral distress which can be experienced by that is the way to go for the future. I thought I'd end with a joke. I was reminded of it by the remark about surgeons, which is, well, I remember a colleague of mine some years ago saying, I was having this conversation with this group, and one of them was a surgeon, and I said, well, I think there are ethical issues here. And the surgeon said, when somebody talks about ethics, I reach for my golf clubs. Thank you very much.